It was the kind of moment that made everyone on the plane stop chewing their stale pretzels and gasp in unison. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin like a firecracker. A flight attendant, a tall woman with a tight bun and a name tag that read Karen, had just slapped a passenger, a black woman in her mid-30s wearing a simple hoodie and jeans. The passenger, whose name was Naomi Carter, stumbled back into her first-class seat, her hand flying to her cheek. The entire cabin froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the baby in row 12 stopped crying. But here's the kicker. Naomi Carter wasn't just any passenger. She was the billionaire owner of the airline. And Karen had no idea. Flight attendant slaps black woman unaware she's the billionaire that owns the plane. Yes, you read that right. Now, before we get to the juicy part of how Karen ended up slapping the most powerful woman on the plane, let's rewind a bit. Because, trust me, this story didn't start with a slap. It started with a delay, a spilled drink, and a whole lot of attitude. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Naomi Carter, the 35-year-old tech billionaire and founder of Carter Innovations, was running late. She had just finished a meeting with her team about a new AI project and was rushing to catch her private jet. But due to some last-minute paperwork, she missed her flight. Frustrated, she decided to fly commercial instead. She didn't mind she liked blending in sometimes. No one ever recognized her in her casual clothes, and she enjoyed the anonymity. Naomi boarded Delta Flight 227 to Los Angeles, her favorite city. She settled into her first-class seat, pulled out her laptop, and started working. She didn't notice the flight attendant, Karen, giving her the side eye. Karen had been having a rough day. Her boyfriend had dumped her via text that morning. Her coffee had spilled all over her uniform, and now she had to deal with a full flight of demanding passengers. She was in no mood for nonsense. About an hour into the flight, Karen was pushing the drink cart down the aisle when she accidentally bumped into Naomi's seat. The entire cart jerked, and a glass of orange juice tipped over, spilling all over Naomi's laptop. Naomi jumped up, her hoodie soaked. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Karen said, though her tone didn't sound very sorry. She handed Naomi a napkin, but Naomi was already frustrated. "This is a $5,000 laptop," Naomi said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Can you be more careful?" Karen's face turned red. "Ma'am, accidents happen. Maybe you shouldn't have your laptop out during drink service." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? Are you blaming me for this?" The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers were watching now, some whispering, others pretending to mind their own business. Karen, feeling embarrassed and defensive, snapped. "You know what? You're being rude. I don't have to take this from you." Naomi crossed her arms. "And I don't have to take poor service from you. What's her name? I'd like to speak to your manager." That's when it happened. Karen, in a moment of pure rage, reached out and slapped Naomi across the face. The sound was so loud it could have woken up the pilot. Everyone gasped. Naomi stood there, stunned, her cheek burning. Karen immediately realized what she'd done and froze, her eyes wide with horror. Before anyone could react, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been informed of an incident on board, and we will be making an emergency landing in Dallas. Please remain seated and calm." Naomi slowly sat back down, her eyes never leaving Karen's. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. Karen, still standing there, started to panic. What had she just done? And who exactly had she just slapped? The plane began its descent, and the passengers whispered furiously among themselves. But Naomi? She just smiled. This was about to get interesting. The plane touched down in Dallas with a jolt, and the passengers erupted into chatter. Everyone was trying to figure out what had just happened. Karen, the flight attendant who had slapped Naomi, was pacing nervously near the galley. Her hands were shaking, and her mind was racing. She kept replaying the moment in her head. The sound of the slap, the gasps from the passengers, the look on Naomi's face. What had she done? And more importantly, who was this woman? Naomi, on the other hand, was calm. Too calm. She sat in her seat, her hoodie still damp from the spilled orange juice, typing away on her phone. She had already sent a message to her assistant, and within minutes, the wheels of her empire were in motion. She didn't say a word to Karen or anyone else. She just waited. As soon as the plane came to a stop, two uniformed officers boarded and made their way to first class. Karen's heart sank. She thought they were there for her. But instead, they approached Naomi. "Miss Carter?" one of the officers asked. Naomi looked up and nodded. "That's me. We've been instructed to escort you off the plane. Your team is waiting for you." Karen's jaw dropped. "Miss Carter?" She watched in shock as Naomi stood up, grabbed her bag, and followed the officers off the plane. The other passengers craned their necks to see what was happening. Who was this woman? And why did she have her own team waiting for her? Once Naomi was off the plane, Karen's supervisor, a stern woman named Linda, pulled her aside. "Karen, do you have any idea what you've done?" Karen shook her head, her voice trembling. I don't know. She was being rude, and I lost it." Linda sighed. "That woman you slapped? That's Naomi Carter. She's the billionaire owner of Carter Innovations. And guess what? She also owns a majority stake in this airline. You just slapped the woman who signs our paychecks." Karen's face turned pale. "What? No, that's not possible. She was wearing a hoodie." Linda pinched the bridge of her nose. "Karen, you need to start thinking before you act. This isn't just about you anymore. This is a PR nightmare for the airline. And for you, it's probably the end of your career." Meanwhile, Naomi was escorted to a private lounge in the airport. Her team was already there, along with the CEO of the airline, a nervous-looking man named Greg Thompson. Greg stood up as soon as Naomi walked in. "Miss Carter, I cannot apologize enough for what happened on that flight," Greg said, his voice shaky. "This is completely unacceptable, and I assure you, we will take immediate action." Naomi sat down and crossed her legs. "Greg, let's not waste time. I want that flight attendant fired. Today. And I want a public apology from the airline. This kind of behavior is inexcusable." Greg nodded vigorously. "Of course, Miss Carter. Consider it done." Naomi leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "But that's not all. I want you to implement a new training program for all your staff. Sensitivity training, conflict resolution, the works. And I want regular reports on its progress. If I don't see improvement, I'll have no choice but to sell my shares and take my business elsewhere." Greg swallowed hard. "Understood, Ms. Carter. We'll make this right." Back on the plane, Karen was packing up her things. Linda had handed her a termination letter and told her to leave immediately. As she walked through the airport, dragging her suitcase behind her, she couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and regret. How had things gone so wrong? She had worked so hard to become a flight attendant, and now it was all over because of one stupid mistake. But Karen wasn't the type to go down without a fight. As she sat in the airport food court, scrolling through her phone, an idea began to form in her mind. Maybe she couldn't get her job back, but she could make sure everyone knew her side of the story. She opened her social media app and started typing. By the time Naomi's private jet took off from Dallas, Karen's post had already gone viral. It was a long, emotional rant about how she had been bullied by a passenger and how the airline had thrown her under the bus. She didn't mention Naomi by name, but it was clear who she was talking about. The comments were pouring in. Some people supported Karen, while others called her out for her actions. Naomi's assistant showed her the post as they flew back to Los Angeles. Naomi read it, her expression unreadable. Then she handed the phone back and said, "Let her talk. This isn't over yet." By the next morning, Karen's social media post had exploded. It had been shared thousands of times, and hashtags like #JusticeForKaren and #PlaneSlap were trending. People were taking sides. Some sympathized with Karen, calling her a victim of a rude and entitled passenger, while others condemned her for her unprofessional behavior. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, it was everywhere. Naomi Carter, meanwhile, was sitting in her penthouse office in downtown Los Angeles, sipping her morning coffee and scrolling through the headlines. She wasn't surprised by the backlash. In fact, she had expected it. What she hadn't expected was how personal some of the attacks were. People were calling her everything from a privileged billionaire to a bully. One particularly nasty comment even accused her of using her wealth to silence a hardworking woman. Naomi's assistant, a sharp young man named Marcus, walked in with a tablet. "Ms. Carter, the PR team is ready for your call. They've drafted a statement, but they want your approval before releasing it. Naomi set down her coffee. Let's hear it. Marcus read the statement aloud. It was a carefully worded apology, expressing regret for the unfortunate incident and emphasizing the airline's commitment to improving staff training. It didn't mention Karen by name, but it did say that the employee involved had been released from her duties. Naomi shook her head. No, that's not going to work. We're not apologizing for something that wasn't our fault. Rewrite it. I wanted to be clear that the airline does not tolerate violence or discrimination of any kind. And I wanted to include a reminder that I, as the majority shareholder, am committed to holding the company to the highest standards. Marcus nodded and hurried out of the room to relay the changes. Karen, now back home in Atlanta, was glued to her phone. The support she was getting online was overwhelming. Strangers were sending her messages of encouragement, and a few even offered to help her find a new job. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. She wanted Naomi Carter to feel the same humiliation she had felt. That's when she got a call from a producer at a popular daytime talk show. They wanted her to come on air and tell her side of the story. Karen didn't hesitate. I'll be there, she said. 2 days later, Karen was sitting on a brightly lit stage, facing a live audience and millions of viewers at home. The host, a charismatic woman named Lisa, leaned in with a sympathetic smile. Karen, thank you for being here. Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened on that flight? Karen took a deep breath and launched into her story. She painted herself as the victim, a hard-working flight attendant who had been pushed to her limit by a rude and demanding passenger. She didn't mention the slap at first, but when Lisa pressed her, Karen broke down in tears. I know I shouldn't have done it, she sobbed, but she was so mean to me. I just snapped. I'm not perfect, but I'm human, and I think everyone deserves a second chance. The audience erupted into applause. Lisa handed Karen a tissue and turned to the camera. Well, there you have it. A woman pushed to her breaking point. What do you think, folks? Should Karen get her job back? Let us know in the comments. Naomi watched the interview from her office, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. Marcus stood beside her, looking nervous. Miss Carter, the PR team thinks we should release the statement now. The longer we wait, the worse it looks. Naomi shook her head. No, not yet. Let them talk. Let them think they've won. Then we'll hit them with the truth. Marcus frowned. The truth? Naomi smiled. Yes, the truth. You see, Marcus, I had my assistant record the entire incident on my phone. Every word, every action. And I've been waiting for the right moment to release it. Marcus's eyes widened. You're going to release the video? Naomi nodded. Exactly. But not yet. Let Karen have her moment in the spotlight. Then we'll see how quickly the tide turns. That evening, Karen's interview was the top story on every news channel. People were calling for Naomi to apologize, and some were even boycotting the airline. Karen felt like she was on top of the world. But as she sat in her living room, scrolling through the comments, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a tweet from Naomi Carter herself. The truth always comes out. Stay tuned. #plain slap. Karen's heart skipped a beat. What did that mean? What was Naomi planning? Before she could process it, her phone started blowing up with messages. People were sending her links to a new video that had just been posted online. With trembling hands, Karen clicked on one of the links. The video began to play. It was footage from the plane, clear as day. Karen watched in horror as she saw herself slap Naomi, heard herself yelling, saw the look of shock on Naomi's face. The video ended with a caption, "Violence is never the answer." #truth hurts. Karen dropped her phone. The comments were already flooding in, but she couldn't bring herself to read them. She knew what they would say. She had lost. The release of the video changed everything. Within hours, the public's sympathy for Karen evaporated. Social media exploded with outrage, and the hashtag #FireKaren began trending. The airline issued a formal statement, reiterating their zero-tolerance policy for violence and confirming that Karen would not be reinstated. Meanwhile, Naomi Carter's calm and composed handling of the situation earned her widespread praise. Her approval rating soared, and Carter Innovation saw a spike in stock value. Karen, now unemployed and vilified online, retreated from the public eye. She deactivated her social media accounts and moved in with her sister in a small town outside Atlanta. The talk show that had once championed her story quietly distanced itself, and the offers for interviews dried up. Naomi, on the other hand, used the incident as a catalyst for change. She launched a nationwide campaign to improve working conditions for airline staff, including mandatory sensitivity training and mental health support. She even reached out to Karen privately, offering to cover the cost of counseling and career retraining, a gesture that surprised many but solidified Naomi's reputation as a compassionate leader. In the end, the plane slap incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of snap judgments and the power of accountability. And while Karen's life would never be the same, Naomi's legacy as a fair and forward-thinking billionaire only grew stronger.